I want to start with something that really touched me when I was listening to your book. And I remember I had to pull over the car and write this down, as you said it in your book. And the quote is this: if you see everything through a scientific lens, you're not experiencing all that life has to offer. The need for spirituality is seen across cultures and has been for millennia. We have evolved to be spiritual beings, and there is a psychological need that is being denied if we allow our rationality to close off belief. I thought we could start by expanding on this concept.
Wow, like even hearing that I wrote that and read that out is wild.
Yeah.
It's
it really
beautiful.
did touch me. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think, one of the things that we understand about each other is that when you're trained as a doctor, it takes over your life. Like everything is about, you hang out with doctors, you have the same conversations.
Yeah.
And so maybe I could start with some evidence for rational rupee.
Yeah.
So you know about the biopsychosocial model of healthcare, right? So that's about the physicality, the mentality, and like what's around you socially. Like we have to always ask people like, who do you have to care for you and that kind of thing. But there's papers from about 10 years ago now that talk about the biopsychosocial spiritual model of healthcare, particularly in care of the elderly and end of life. But it should be everything, obviously, because someone's beliefs, how can those be excluded from how you care about someone, either as a doctor or as a person? And it's just not talked about. And that's so wrong. 85% of people globally identify with a religion. So, again, how can that not be part of when you're caring for someone, part of what you include? I remember as a psychiatrist, when I had people from different cultures, if they had beliefs that, either they wanted a shaman to pull bones out of their head or whatever it was, I always was like, as long as there's no cross interference with the medication, please do that as well but please take your medication, but please, do whatever you feel you need to. So I think honoring that's really important. And also personally, for both of us, I guess, having left medicine, you do suddenly think, what else is there? Like, what am I about? Like, what's important? And certainly at times of duress, like post-divorce and then post-bereavement, I've absolutely turned to those sort of things. And they've taken me to another level. And I think when anyone has a crisis, there's a fork. And it can ruin the rest of your life. It can make you really bitter. Or it can give you hope. It can make you a better person. It can make you kinder and less judgmental and, all of that kind of stuff. So as hard as it is, I made that choice of what I wanted to be. And so I've got something to tell you that I purposely didn't tell you before the podcast.
Okay.
It's going to be old news by the time the podcast comes out.
Okay.
But I found out 2 days ago that I'm on the Sunday Times bestseller list at number 2. And yesterday that I'm on the New York Times bestseller list as well.
No way.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh.
If you think about what a career risk this book was,
yeah,
that's insane.
That's amazing. Gosh, I'm so happy for you.
I also want to say something else. It's just so jokes, because when we were in LA together in July, and I came to have dinner with you after I'd recorded with Stephen Bartlett.
Yeah.
And I remember you were in the kitchen cooking, and I was chatting to you, and I said, Stephen pushed me really hard on why I'm not dating again.
Yeah, I remember that.
And Rochelle said, do you have any idea how many men are going to slide into your DMs once this comes out?
And did that happen? We won't let you. We won't
I'll tell you afterwards.
Yeah. That's so funny.
So funny.
And it was interesting because during that time when we were in LA together, you were saying that you were sort of pushed to talk a bit more about the science, or there was an expectation that you wanted to talk a bit more about the science.
That's what I felt. So I think I was just so nervous after it, because obviously it was the first time
for sure
I was talking about my private life. Once I saw the podcast and saw the reaction, I was absolutely thrilled, and I felt like I was so grounded and everything. But I was just like nervous about how it might have come across. I also want to say another thing, which is that before I flew to LA, you texted me and said, "Do you want me to pick you up at the airport?"
Yeah.
I think because had I told you that when I land at Heathrow, I feel really sad because Robin was always there. And
You told me afterwards
Oh,
when
did I tell
I
you
offered
after?
to be Ruba.
Yeah,
So
I
we've
know.
got 3 people here: Ration, Rupee, Whoopie, and Ruba.
Ruva was amazing. I was literally like, I can't just call you when I'm anywhere in LA and get a lift, can I? And you were like, yeah, you can. And you were so upset about the fact that I wasn't data roaming.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, come on, mate. It's like £7 a day. Hopefully you've fixed that since.
I did. I've got an eSIM now and everything.
Oh, wow! Look at you. So from the woo woo side, or I it feels a bit dismissive calling it woo woo,
Yeah.
but from the sort of instinctual side or the intuitive side, I think if medics listening to this, or anyone listening to this who is sort of really attracted to the idea of evidence-based medicine ruling everything, I think if you dig really deep, there are some core beliefs that you have that cannot be explained by science. There are feelings you have towards certain things. There are, and whether you want to explain that through the lens of the universe guiding you or not, it's undeniable if you allow yourself to open to those forces.
It started for me because in the first couple of weeks after Robin died, I had a neighbour whose partner had passed away 5 years previously. I'd never asked him anything about it, but because of where I was, where I was mentally, I said to him, "Is it okay to ask you anything about grief?" And he said yes. So I said, "Do you think it's possible to still keep in touch with the person that's passed away?" And he got quite agitated and said, "Absolutely not." And then said, "Because if that were possible, everyone would be talking about it." And I remember, even in the depths of my grief, thinking, why is that the reason that it can't be true? Because everyone's not talking about it. And then 4 weeks later, so 6 weeks after Robin died, I think I've shared this before, I got a thump to the shoulder in the middle of the night. I saw him standing next to my bed. I felt the effort of him trying to make himself seen. And then I thought, do I tell anyone this? But because it was, so shocking and overwhelming, I ended up kind of blurting it out to a neighbour. And I thought, a not different neighbour, I don't know if she's religious. I don't know if she's spiritual. I don't really know, what she believes. And she turned to me with this massive smile on her face and said, "You are so lucky." And then she shared that she'd lost her dad a year before and she'd never had anything like that. So then I started, telling a few more people. And everyone I've spoken to has had some experience of sensing a presence or, having weird electrical things going on or smelling something or getting signs. But I wasn't really getting signs, but I was desperate to get signs. Obviously, his name was Robin, and I did see a lot of robins in the garden, but that wasn't enough for me to know that he was still around. So basically, at one point, it felt like I started seeing all these repeating numbers, and I used to call him my twin flame, which has the number 11 or 1111, and a lot of people say they see that on their phone and stuff. But because he was in finance, it made sense to me that he would communicate with me through numbers. He was obsessed with the Fibonacci sequence. And I just started getting all these number messages all the time. And at first it was not exact, not necessarily timely, but then it started happening on really significant anniversaries. And I just learnt into it. I was just okay. And the more I did that, I feel I don't know what happens when you die, obviously, but I feel he also kind of learnt how to do it. And then it took about 2.5 years where I felt I was constantly getting messages from him.
Yeah.
And I think something else that I shared, which you'll find interesting as a doctor, is that I would talk to him in my head. And if I asked a question, I would get a thought so quickly, quicker than you can think, and not necessarily what I would say. But then I, as a former psychiatrist, was this is thought insertion. That's a symptom of schizophrenia.
This is a really interesting part of your story, actually, because I think we see the Tara today who has come to a place where you can make sense of things and you can accept things that you can't explain through the lens of traditional science and medicine. But at the time, it must have felt quite scary being a traditionally trained psychiatrist, because these are a constellation of symptoms that you've recognized during your career in other people that are signs of a mental health illness.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have the constellation, I had the one. But, you know, there were times around the first and second anniversaries where I felt so depressed for like weeks and weeks and weeks. I actually had to look in the mirror and do a mental state examination on myself and ask myself, like, am I in clinical depression? Should I go and see my GP? And I remember the one question I asked myself was, do you have no enjoyment of anything, anhedonia? And I thought, no, I still love my friends. I can still feel happy if something good happens. And, you know, that was the one thing that made me think like I could carry on. Yeah, but I mean, I lent into it. I felt like everything that I had lived my life by, like manifestation, visualization, love, abundance, had just shattered. I had like, my worldview was like, I don't even know what it is anymore. I couldn't trust my own intuition. You know, not feeling like you can't trust yourself is really, like, that's the one thing that any human has if they don't have anything else, anyone else. So picking myself up from that, I think a lot of my friends thought, and a lot of people do this, like throw yourself back into work to like just avoid having to feel the pain. I knew I couldn't do that. I wanted to heal fully. And to do that, I knew that I had to like go to the bottom of, you know, this pit that I was in. And I mean, I didn't work for 3 years. So I just went with it. And I did want signs. So there's obviously a conversation around confirmation bias, but now I don't ask for specific things. I just see them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really lovely.
For someone who's coming to this conversation completely brand new, how would you explain what a sign is versus, I don't know, a coincidence or something that your brain, as you've explained in your book and your previous book, The Source, is just paying more attention to through selective attention? So
I met this documentary filmmaker for a coffee to discuss doing some filming with her, which I did. And the second time I met her, I told her that my husband had passed away. And she said to me, my dad's been dead for 10 years now, and my mum says she's never been closer to him in her whole life, and she gets unmistakable signs. So I was like, well, I'm taking that phrase and I'm going to, you know, run with it and ask for it. So what I say actually genuinely to my own friends is, if you've lost someone and you want to like try to find out if you can get communication from them, then think of, you know, really fond memory that you've got with them, or like an in joke that only they would get, and choose a symbol that represents that and make it unusual, make it something you're not going to see every day, and just wait and see what happens. And, you know, there are so many stories in the book of ones that I've had, but also all the case studies in the book are not in my friendship group. So my publisher literally said to me, your friendship group believes in science, talks about science. That's your language. You know, we talk about, we affirm each other by saying, oh, I got goosebumps when you said that. You know, that's a certain group of people, obviously. So they made me get stories from people that I either don't know at all, because they're like people I know through someone, or people that I'd met once, like this filmmaker whose story is in the book. And honestly, Rupi, since I've started sharing this privately, everyone has like some kind of story. And then since I've shared it publicly, my team have had thousands of emails, thousands, not hundreds. I've had thousands of DMs from people saying exactly the same thing. I had no idea that the reaction would be what it's been, and how many people feel like this. And particularly want to say to you how many doctors and clinical psychologists and psychotherapists have reached out to me and said, this is their belief system, but they don't talk about it because it's not acceptable in our professions.
Yeah. And how do we I'm going to bring you back to Rational Rupi here. How do we marry this with what we understand about consciousness? because you talk really eloquently about consciousness and how it cannot be explained by the anatomy or the structure of our brains, and it's still one of these black boxes, but we sort of accept it. I don't think it's really discussed that much.
No.
And perhaps that like lends itself to a wider discussion about what we can't prove within science right now, and why we should be open to this idea of science and everything else.
I think there's two things here, and I just want to pick up on something that you said earlier, because I don't want that just to go like unmentioned, which is that there's a lot of stuff that we can't prove, even in our lifetimes. For example, when I went back to LA after you were there, I went in a driverless car with Drew.
Yeah.
I mean, that was science fiction when we were growing up. Things like the observable universe. You know, we know that the universe is either infinite or boundless. We know that we can't see all of it, but we know that there's more of it there. We can only see what can be seen by the limits of the speed of light. So things that we thought weren't true before have subsequently become proven. But you made like a passing comment where you said something like, you know, you base this on things that can't be proven. Well, I put so much science and citations into the book about near-death experiences and terminal lucidity and dark retreats and lucid dreaming that seriously question what we accept as the nature of consciousness. Yeah. And we don't know everything. We have like acceptable beliefs, but, you know, really serious scientists like David Eagleman and Donald Hoffman. So David says this idea that the brain might be like a radio that can pick up signals can't be proven, but it categorically cannot be disproven. Donald Hoffman says the construct of the universe is space-time. We accept that. It's not provable, and he suggests that maybe the construct of the universe is consciousness. So I just think, you know, we put it so far, like, because we're doctors, we have to have all the evidence base. But actually, if you're a scientist or a clinician, you have to question things as well. You can't just accept everything as it is. I mean, you must have had, like I have, patients where it doesn't fit the picture.
Yeah.
And you've got to, like, you know, see something that doesn't fit what you think it should be and think outside the box. And that's life or death for people.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm much more open and accepting of these ideas because I've questioned the way we do medicine in the first instance. So when I was at med school, it's probably very similar in the way it was taught when you were at medical school as well. Where
you make me sound ancient, really.
No, you know, but a couple of years on me, that's all. But my point is that medicine hasn't changed that much in terms of the way we do things, diagnosis, symptoms, and a label. And when you have that label, there is, like, you know, a concrete way of treating said condition. Well, what if the whole way of thinking about medicine is on its head, and actually we should be thinking first about what are the root causes that can be responsible for multiple different conditions. Autoimmune conditions, as you know, can be something that can be caused by stress. And that, for me, you know, when I was at medical school, would have been unfathomable to even say out loud.
I know.
You know?
Yeah.
And I still think people, you know, feel that that's an outrageous thing to say. I disagree. I think the body is really, really in tune to, you know, our thoughts and our physical manifestation of disease. So I think I've come around to this idea myself, but I'm going into the rational route here. Like, I think people will still struggle with this idea of, like, accepting things that are not definitively proven. Even though there's evidence to suggest that we should be more open, it's not definitively proven.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, I think, you know, what has changed maybe in the last 10 to 20 years is a much better understanding of inflammation being a root cause of most, if not all, at least metabolic disorders. And like you said, when we were at medical school, that was not a thing. So, and then I also want to say that in one of the sort of starting chapters, which is about our senses, obviously everyone knows we've got 5 senses. You and I went to medical school, so we know that there are more senses than that. But did you know there are 34 currently?
No, I didn't know. When you said that, I was like,
Yeah,
my fingers like, I don't think I'll be able to recognize
I
them
wouldn't
all.
be able to read them all,
Sure,
like say
yeah.
them all to you now. But
Yeah.
when I did the research, it was like, yeah, of course that makes sense. We've got appetite and waste senses. We've got
Absolutely.
like blood oxygen.
Baroreceptors
Yeah,
and-
all of
yeah.
that stuff.
Mm.
But taste, for example, is subdivided into 5. So bitter, sweet, salty, sour, and umami. Umami was only discovered in the 1980s. But does that mean it didn't exist before then? No. And the point I wanted to come back to that's really important is that everything that we know that's provable, that we believe, is fine. I don't think there's anyone that's going to listen to this that hasn't had a feeling in their gut that something is different to what, you should be doing. That either, they dismiss or they go with. That's irrelevant. But we do have this sense of knowing. And it's not always about everything that's provable.
There is a parallel with Jeffrey Redinger, and he wrote a book about spontaneous remission. And he sort of chronicles all these different cases of people overcoming cancer, overcoming like incurable autoimmune conditions, things that perplex many doctors. And the issue is, just like you've articulated, we don't talk about it. And when you get a room of, like, let's say 100 doctors and you ask, has anyone ever seen spontaneous remission? Bunch of hands go up. Majority of hands go up. Okay, put them down. Have you talked about it openly? Have you written it up? Have you, submitted a case study? No hands go up. Because it's just seemed, it's just one of those quirks of medicine. But actually, when those quirks and you start counting them all together, they add up. There's something else going on. And I think we should all be open to this idea. And he actually talks a lot about belief in that section of the book as well.
Yeah, and I think I want to say that having, been a doctor, I have absolutely seen that miracles can happen. Things that you thought there's no way this person's ever going to recover, sometimes they happen. Equally, I'm obviously going to say that in my personal case, a miracle did not happen. Somebody got a disease, had the brutal treatment, and it didn't work. So, but both of those things are true, but we just don't talk about the first one.
Yeah. I want to talk about near-death experiences. You talk in the book about how there are some research that have chronicled like 10,000 or so near-death experiences, and they all appear to align with similar experiences, similar characteristics. What can we learn from near-death experiences?
Yeah, and what's really interesting about them is that just learning about them, so people who are studying social work or nursing or medicine, if that's like one of the units that they learn, they also get the benefits that people get from them. So when you've had a near-death experience, people say that they no longer fear death. They know that there's something beautiful on the other side. They engage with life on a deeper level and take healthy risks that they may not have taken if they were worried about dying or failing, because they don't fear failure anymore either. They become less materialistic. They see the connection between everything, like us, the universe, if that's what you want to call it, but it could be Godhead, it could be a cosmic force, it could be source. And so have you watched About Time?
No, I haven't watched it.
It's a beautiful movie anyway.
Yeah.
You and Rochelle should watch it. But what happens at the end of it is this guy who can time travel. So he continually was going back to create the ideal scenario of getting his like dream girl and having a family with her and stuff. In the end, there's a scene where, he's just like rushing to work. He's on his commute. He grabs a coffee, doesn't make eye contact with the person that's like, serving it to him. And then he realizes that the true gift, and there's a parallel here for me where I think about the true gift that Robin's given me. He says the true gift is that if you actually really engage with life, you shouldn't need to change anything. And you just see this like it's going to make me like really emotional, but you know, this beautiful scene where he pays for the coffee and notices that the girl's just like giving him like eye contact and a beautiful smile, and he just appreciates that so much. And I think on this journey with signs, that's what I needed whilst I was navigating grief, for comfort and guidance. But I did get to a point where I was like, I got what I needed to feel like I'm still in touch with him. But the gift that he's really given me is that I must re-engage with life. Yeah, I'm so lucky to be alive and healthy. And I have things that I can offer to the world to, for me, like, you know, my purpose is helping people. I've been a doctor, I've been a coach. Now I've been given the incredible privilege of having platforms like yours to like speak to so many people. That I must do that. And that's why I wrote the book. But obviously people said to me, like, don't you think you're taking a career risk?
Yeah.
But, you know, what's turned out to be such a beautiful gift is like, it's like the best part of my career ever.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I think, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier or like in a voice note to you or something, but I keep on thinking like, it's so brave, like Tara, you're so brave to talk about your story, talk about something that's deeply personal, but also talk about things that are really taboo, especially coming from a doctor and a neuroscientist, someone, you know, who's really, really well established. But on the same side, like just as you've been saying during this podcast, there's a lot of evidence actually that you point to in the book. So is it actually bravery, or is it actually, you know, you just like presenting everything to us and like, look, there's something going on here, and we should all be open-minded as skeptical scientists. This is something that we should be engaging with.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And so many thoughts going on in my head. I just need to have a little think
Yeah.
like where I need to start. So I think the first thing to say that's really important is, you know, I came to you when Robin got his diagnosis. Like, you've known the entire story, but only my friends have known it for almost 4 years.
Yeah.
And I was never going to share my sad story because it's not relevant to people that don't know me. I always said, if I find something with the benefit of hindsight that could help others, then I will share. And it took a lot for me to share. I really didn't want to.
Yeah.
But what I found was so comforting, so guiding, has brought me so much joy. I could not hold it back from people. And I actually didn't even realize how much pain people are in, and that not talking about this is so wrong for humanity. I don't know where I was going to go.
No, that's like, that really does speak to me, because by not talking about it, you're depriving other people of comfort, and actually an exploration of this conversation. If they see someone like yourself who's so established talking about it, it validates a lot of these feelings, and it, you know, hopefully it expands a lot of people's minds to this idea. It might even like trigger more research into this, hopefully.
That would be amazing. I mean, I think so, because you know me, and like I'm there. I was going to say there's no rational Tara. Of course there is a rational Tara. Of course,
yeah.
But I don't like lean into that as much.
Really?
No. I mean, I live and die by my intuition. That's been a long established thing. But I think I didn't realize how much being a neuroscientist and a doctor would validate this conversation, because I love Laura Lynn Jackson, who's written Signs and The Light Between Us. And, you know, I read books like The Untethered Soul and The Seat of the Soul and like Only Love is Real. Love all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But for some reason, for people to hear it coming from a medic and a scientist makes a difference.
Totally.
And that's what I can do.
Absolutely.
And if that ended my career, I wouldn't care.
Yeah.
It's too important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that, you know, we've had conversations about this when you were my coach as well, about how I need to be a lot more honest about myself, about identifying as a medic, and the leap that I had to take from moving from clinical medicine into the type of medicine that I now practice.
Mm.
And, you know, in comparison, that's a very small leap to the one that you're making, and you're really paving the way for a lot of people to make their own mini leaps.
Yeah.
I want to bring us back to near-death experiences, because on the one side, there's the side of me that wants to believe that those experiences in some way validating or proving that there is something that's comforting on the other side, that there is whether it's another universe, whether it's another sort of spiritual entity. If you were to put your neuroscience hat on, are there any ways in which we can explain that experience, whether it's a surge in certain neurochemicals, cortisol, whether it's adrenaline that leads to the similar experience that people have during NDEs?
I think, interestingly, I got a comment yesterday on Insta, which is that a number of these are when people are under anesthesia.
Okay.
So I would like to exclude those, because obviously drugs could cause an altered state of consciousness. But there are, you know, more than enough where anesthesia is not involved, and it involves cardiac arrest and like flatlining of EEG. So these people's hearts and brains are not working. And there are a couple of high-profile doctors that have had this experience. So Ibn Alexander wrote Proof of Heaven. He was an atheist, and he then said, I know there's a heaven, I know there's a God that's benign, and, you know, it's beautiful on the other side. I always forget the name of the doctor that was basically like submerged in water for like 20 minutes, and people were trying to get to her and they couldn't, and she had an out-of-body experience, went almost to the other side, but then was told to come back. And all the time knowing that you cannot be technically dead for that long and actually live again and not have brain damage or whatever. But there are just so many cases. You know, I interviewed Dr. Bruce Grayson for my podcast, and I loved that because he's a professor of psychiatry. And it reminded me of having a consultant that you really admire and learn from. And I was just like completely lapping it up. And there was a point on that podcast where I said, you're making me feel like everything that we need to know, and for, you know, my point of view is obviously about modern mental health issues, is like hiding in plain sight. It's not stuff that we need to learn for new. It's just stuff that we need to remember. And there was a really emotional moment where he responded to that. And then equally, I interviewed Professor Alexander Bathiani, who does his research on terminal lucidity. And I pushed him so hard just to like say whether the consciousness can exist separately from the body. He was like, you know, my friends and family always say like, oh, just tell us what you actually really think, you know, like we won't tell anyone. And he said, no one's pushed me as hard as you.
Really?
And then I said, and he said, you know, it can't be proven, but blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, I'm not going to make you say it. I'm going to say that given what you've just said to me, the consciousness can exist separately from the physical body. And this is about the difference between dualism and materialism. There's also animism and panpsychism, all this like
What's
cool...
animism and panpsychism? I don't think I've come across those.
Panpsychism, I think people would have to read the book.
Yeah.
I think panpsychism is everything has a soul or a spirit, even if it's a rock or a tree or whatever.
Okay.
Animism is about animals.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and there's more. And I have to say, you know, I hated writing.
Yeah.
We went for that walk and talk, and you were like, this is what you've got to do. But when I was like research,
suck it up, Tara. Just get over it.
I was like, I can't do this. When I was actually Googling stuff like, is art what makes us human? You know, like, and things like panpsychism stuff, I was like, this is cool.
Yeah.
This is so cool.
Yeah.
I wish I could have just been researching that stuff without actually having to write a book, because obviously the pressure was huge. But and like I did lots of research into like Paleolithic times, ancient cultures.
We're going to get into that for sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about terminal lucidity, because I don't think many people will have come across that. And I've never experienced it myself as a doctor. So
Me neither.
I did some work in geriatric wards and, terminally ill patients quite often, and very commonly it's just a very sad story where you have a lot of loved ones and they watch their loved one pass gradually without any sort of hope of them regaining their former self. But terminal lucidity is very, very interesting, and again something that we just have never been able to explain. So why don't you tell us a bit about
So I just want to kind of reiterate a little bit what you've said, that I feel like mental illness and dementia, I feel are the cruelest ways to lose the person that you love, because they're still there, but they're not themselves. So in terminal lucidity, people who have what we currently believe to be irreversible brain damage, so dementia or, you know, a result of a brain tumor or something, and they are no longer themselves. They don't recognize their own family. Usually within 1 to 24 hours before death, they suddenly become completely lucid, which means they know who they are, where they are, who their family are. They have a like completely normal conversation like they would have had years ago with their family. And just going back to what you said earlier, this is potentially explained by a surge in neurochemicals, but it's not explained by the fact that the neurons and synapses have not been working for years, that there's, you know, beta amyloid and neurofibrillary tangles and tau proteins in the brain that have like killed off its ability to work in the way that it did.
Yeah.
So all that, you know, that both those professors on near-death experiences and terminal lucidity have really said is that the brain under duress on the border of life and death shows us something that potentially we are capable of during life. And that probably the brain filters down the capability of the mind and our expanded consciousness for us to survive on this material plane. And how exciting that is to a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist is mind-blowing. Like, literally, it just makes me feel like, what a time to be alive.
Yeah. Have you come across, I'm sure you have, Professor Anil Seth's work around how our day-to-day living is basically a controlled hallucination?
No.
So he does a lot of work in consciousness. That's his whole get-up. He's been on the podcast before. And this idea of you essentially pruning away the incredible sensory, it would be sensory overload otherwise. I mean, like you talk about in the book about how the feeling of our clothes on our skin, if we were constantly aware of that during our day-to-day, it's just so much input to it would be overwhelming. And in a similar way, his theory is we prune away these different inputs so we can actually function, and we just focus on certain inputs at any one time.
Yeah.
But actually our consciousness can be expanded in a way, to use that terminology.
I mean, I think it's going to be so interesting for us to watch like Rafi growing up, because I believe that children are super intuitive, super creative, understand things. Like, for example, as a child, I was kind of obsessed with parallel universes and string theory, but that gets schooled out of us, parented out of us. You know, religion tells us like to believe certain things and not believe other things. So I feel like it's a return to that. I think, you know, really common example that a lot of people might resonate with is that, you know, if you're ridiculed as a child for certain things that you feel, then you cut off your intuition, because you've got to keep your caregivers interested in you. That's survival. So, yeah, things like intuition and creativity are more rational things that we can talk about. But I think there's extensions of those things, which are, you know, just a deep sense of knowing, like maybe an understanding of the future, maybe, you know, connection to ancestors. And it's probably worth saying, like right now, that in our culture, we do ancestor worship. You know, we believe in reincarnation. But, you know, Western medical school made me move away from all of that kind of stuff.
Totally, yeah. I mean, it was just completely, I wouldn't say beaten out of me, but like ridicule is the word that comes to mind. This idea that, you know, reincarnation exists, and if your belief system is based on thousands of years old texts and stuff and stories that people used to tell each other, like, you're not really a medic, you're not really a scientist, you're just someone who believes in snake oil and all the rest of it. And I think there are these connotations people I think it speaks to the brain, right? Like, you want to be part of a tribe in your community, you don't want to be shunned or shamed. And that's probably the worst thing that anyone can do. Like this sort of call out culture that you see on social media, and medics actually fighting with other medics as well, which is something that I try and stay clear of as much as possible. But on that note about consciousness, I'm going to push you now on consciousness and how, because I think you've changed my mind about this concept of dualism and monoism. Maybe we should start by defining exactly what we mean by dualism and monoism, and where dualism came from. The sort of Descartes. That was his sort of theory about the separation of mind and body, right?
Yeah. So monoism or materialism suggests that consciousness, emotions, state of mind can only come from matter.
Yeah.
So it can only come from the brain and neurons and synapses and chemicals.
That's monoism.
Yeah.
Okay.
And dualism suggests that the consciousness can arise separately from matter. And so actually, even like way further back than Descartes, all the ancient cultures believed in dualism. And I think it's in the book, I say something like it's 0.004% of time that humanity's existed that we've accepted materialism as the way that things work.
Right.
And I just actually love the arrogance of thinking that we know more than all humans that ever existed before know.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I've been saying to people recently is like, have you ever thought about a day in the life of Homo erectus? Why do we think that we are not going to be a blip in like millennia of humanity, just like all the previous humans? It's mad to me that we think we know everything. And I want to know more. I mean, my life and my work has been so intertwined. I don't know if I love change and growth because I study neuroplasticity, or I don't know if I went into neuroplasticity because that's what I was always like. And, you know, even now that I feel like, you know, the areas I'm really interested in are like longevity and psychedelic work. I think about when I did my intercalated BSc. So after 2 years of medicine, if you just do an extra year, you can get a degree. And the modules I chose for that were neuropharmacology, the biology of aging, the pharmacology of drug dependence, neuroanatomy. I mean, that was like, I'm scared to say, I think it's like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's just come so full circle. Those are the things that I'm interested in. And yeah, I'm just like obsessed with spirituality and ancient, you know, cultures, and there's just so much to learn from them. Like, for example, let me give you a really, really tangible thing. So I had the most amazing psychologist give me therapy through my grief. And it helped enormously. But I had this weird experience just so, you know, at sort of the 10-month point after Robin had passed away, I was sort of doing the best that I'd done. But I knew the anniversary was coming, and I know, you know, I'd read about, someone sent me an article on pathological grief and said that the 6-month point is the lowest point. And that if after a year, someone is still ruminating and crying, that's termed as pathological grief. So, but that the anniversary is very, very hard, even if you're doing a bit better by then. So I was really aware of that. And it was coming up on October 26th. But from the 4th, I was like in so much physical pain. I even went for a massage and it was so painful. I didn't go again for a year. And, you know, I was also like, you know, mentally feeling sort of really depressed. But this physical aches and pains was just weird. And it started on October 4th. And I couldn't work out why. And I ended up looking back in my phone calendar. And October 4th was the day that I took Robin home from hospital, knowing that he had 2 weeks to live. And he actually lived for 3.5 weeks. But that was an extremely stressful day. You know, private ambulance, oxygen had to be in place, you know, sort of hospital bed wasn't ready. And so I sort of, that made me realize that my body remembered something that my mind didn't. And eventually I started having what's called body realignment therapy. I also tried some craniosacral therapy. And it was, I mean, that was not like a relaxing massage. It was so painful. I cried sometimes.
Gosh.
But that physical therapy, that was what took me sort of to the next level of getting that trauma out of my body. So, you know, Bessel van der Kolk's work, The Body Keeps the Score. So he talks a lot about how trauma shuts off the Broca's area of the brain, which is the part that articulates speech. So a lot of people with PTSD don't actually have the words to even benefit from talking therapy. And so yoga or massage or dance or drumming or, you know, humming, chanting, all these things that ancient cultures did, that's the way to exit trauma from your physical body. So ancient Greeks, when they buried their dead, would wail and beat their chests. And it just makes so much sense to me that they knew they had to express it vocally, but also release it physically.
And it speaks to that wisdom that we've sort of lost along the way, right?
Yeah. And so the latest modern science is what's called the serotonin hypothesis. So most people associate serotonin with mood.
Yeah.
But at least 95% of our serotonin is produced outside the central nervous system, mostly in the gut. And that serotonin can't cross the blood-brain barrier, so it has absolutely no effect on mood. And the word itself is derived from serum, which is our blood and plasma, and tone, because in the periphery, serotonin acts on blood vessels to constrict or dilate them, which changes the amount and nature of nutrients and oxygen that go into the tissues. And this is the hypothesis for how trauma is stored in the body.
Gosh. Wow. I've never come across that before.
So this is really new. And I just want to give a shout out to Rayan Zafar. He's a neuropharmacologist working with Professor Nutt at Imperial.
Oh, yeah.
Gave me this theory. But before this theory, which is like, you know, very, very new, Bessel van der Kolk and, you know, just a load of other people in that trauma area have talked about bracing patterns held in the body through trauma. And that's, you know, a lot of that I think is like very non-conscious and not that well understood. But I just remember when Robin was in hospital, I'd come home in the evening and I'd sort of sit in this hunched over position, like almost, I don't know if I was actually clenching my fist, but it felt, you know, I was fighting for his life. And of course, if you sit like that every day for 4 months, that's going to change your posture.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that really makes sense.
It makes sense, like, you know, and I think that's where you marry the sort of the rationality of the science side with the idea of like leaning into ancient practices of if you're literally holding yourself as we do over time, that's going to lead to a physical malformation, if you like, that needs to be treated and needs to be released. And on the subject of releasing, I do want to go back to consciousness, because if consciousness doesn't arise from the matter, where do you believe it arises? Where does it come from? I know that's quite a big question.
That's a big question. That's a really big question. I think I'm just going to say it exists separately.
Okay.
I think that they intertwine, but it's not that consciousness comes from the matter. They both interact with each other.
Do you think it lives on?
I do, obviously. And so do a lot of people now that I've shared. You know, all the major religions, all the ancient cultures have some kind of belief in the afterlife or resurrection or reincarnation. Why? I mean, the only reason that we don't totally go with it is because it can't be proven. But I just don't believe that everything that can't be proven doesn't exist or doesn't matter. I think what's important in terms, I'm just going to do it on our story, is that we could have stayed NHS doctors for the rest of our career, retired, had however many years in retirement, and then died. And that's a life. Having a belief in something greater than that changes your whole life. It makes life so beautiful. It makes you so grateful for life. Let's just say, refer to the 5 regrets of the dying. So this palliative care nurse that wrote this book said that she saw the difference at the end of life in people. And the major factor that made a difference was that people believed in something greater than themselves.
Yeah. And you see it in the blue zones as well, right? They have, obviously, you could put it down to plant-focused diet, exercise, community, but that strong sense of purpose and faith. Even, Rochelle's grandmother, who lived until she was 105.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Diet was mainly cheese. Very stubborn Italian woman. Wonderful, wonderful person. I absolutely adored her. She had one of the strongest senses of faith and religion. Like, one of the happiest days of her life was when she got a letter from the Pope. Went to mass every Sunday. And look, was largely bedridden for the last years of her life, but that strong sense of faith and purpose and the afterlife is something that really gave her that vigor up until her last days. I mean, I had full-on conversations with this woman every time I went to see her, and just holding her hand and everything. And I really believe that, like, to live, if let's say you don't want to believe in any of this, and let's say you don't want to, you can't make sense of it, even just practicing it is going to be good for your health, and all the evidence appears to point in that direction.
I mean, a junior doctor I met in Oxford last year said something to me that's really stuck with me, which is, there is no biology without psychology, and there is no psychology without biology. And even that mind-body connection is not really understood or accepted by most people. I think that's just a few of these things we've mentioned, like inflammation being the root cause of so many diseases, the mind-body connection, and then, if you want to take it further, the nature of consciousness and communication with psyche, spirit, soul, whatever. These are really things that can change people's life, and just even contemplating them, it's not going to harm you. I always, even with writing this book, I always think of do no harm. That's the one thing, that the promise that we made.
Totally.
So, when I suggest that people ask for a sign, I think the worst thing that can happen is you won't get one. It's not going to harm you.
Yeah.
So, why not consider those things?
So we've defined for folks what signs are, how you might ask for a sign. I think the other part of this conversation is, regardless of whether you have the ability or capacity to believe in some of the things that we've talked about, what are some of the practices that we can do to be more open to the universe and more connected? And this speaks to some of the ancient practices that we mentioned a little bit earlier, that I'm certainly trying to get more of in my life, because I like to see health through the lens of evolution and what we know have been passed down in terms of tradition, morning sunlight, walking after meals, all the things that Ayurveda teaches us as well. What are some of the practices that you think are greatest bang for people's buck?
So the biggest one for me is spending time in nature. And when I was in the first few weeks even of grief, I literally couldn't even eat. But the one thing I did do was go for a walk every day. And I just thought, you just can't sit on the sofa all day, at least do a 30-minute walk, get those steps in, kind of thing. And then after a while, I thought, well, I'm not doing anything else. I might as well walk for longer. And I was, very lucky. I was living in a really beautiful part of the countryside. And once I started walking for an hour or more, I could feel the difference on my mental health.
Really?
And again, as a neuroscientist and a psychiatrist, just taking that step back and doing metacognition, looking at myself and thinking, this is actually making you feel like good. That's incredible. Sort of noting that. And then I stumbled across the field of neuroaesthetics, which is about the importance of the arts and culture and beauty, and particularly nature, on mental health, physical health, and longevity. And so what the scientists there say is that we've existed in nature from the beginning of humanity. So it's the most aesthetically pleasing palette to us. And so there's habituation and saliency in the brain. And habituation is that, if you walk past the same amazing tree or impressive architecture every day, you eventually stop noticing it. Saliency is novelty seeking and curiosity, and what I call the art of noticing. Mm-hmm. And once I started practicing it, I would, notice the spring blossoms, notice the autumn leaves. And very quickly, because, I do a neuroplasticity training every year, I noticed how many times a day in my head or out loud I was saying, that's so pretty, that's so beautiful, that's so lovely. Oh, look at this, smell that, And I was like, wow, that's like, I've taken that on really quickly. And I think because we need that as humans, it feels so good that once you start doing it, you can't stop, it's like a drug. And for me, that is my gratitude practice taken to the next level, noticing and appreciating beauty. And what's important, a couple of things that are important about it is that it's both about making and beholding. Mm-hmm. So you could draw or go to an art gallery. You could dance around your living room or go to the ballet. You could sing in the shower or listen to music. And the real lovely thing about it is that you don't have to be good at it. It's the benefits are the same. Got a couple of stats for you. So people who engage in the arts and culture every 2 months have a 31% lower mortality risk. People who only go twice a year and there's so many free galleries, in London, have a 14% lower mortality risk. I'm a massive fan of the ballet. Yeah. And, it used to be such a treat, and I would get the most expensive ticket that I could afford. I'm now obsessed with finding the cheapest tickets, actually having, because I go to everything. And, you can get tickets for £7 or £14.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'll take you.
Yeah, please do.
So, because I think ballet particularly is seen as quite elitist.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, you can. I mean, I don't want to give my secrets away.
Suddenly you won't be able to find these tickets
exactly. Anymore. But like I said, there are free galleries, there are beautiful parks. So and you can just listen to music at home. You can listen to nature sounds. I got this gadget at the Royal Academy of Arts, which is a motion sensitive. Gives out nature sounds when you walk past it. It gives you 2 minutes as if you're walking along a river.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So if you don't have time to go to the river, you just put on this little gadget. Yeah. That's brilliant.
Well, I've actually put it somewhere that I don't go all the time, so I kind of forget about it, and then when I walk past it and it starts, it's just so funny.
So what I'm hearing is, it's important to be a passive recipient of arts and culture, or experiencing nature, or something creative, but it's also important to engage in it, whether you're good at it or not. Yeah. I'll give you an example, and Rochelle hates me doing this, but I've started taking up the ukulele again, and I want to play for Raphael. I'm not good. Aww. It sounds terrible, but hopefully I'm instilling him some sort of awful ukulele music. But it's helping me engage with him a bit more, and show him sounds, live music, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to quote this for Rochelle the next time she tells me to pack it in. That it's actually good for me becoming a bit more intuitive and open.
Yeah.
Epic.
I'm literally visualizing him banging it on the floor though.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. I got him a mini one as well, and he just wants to put it in his mouth the whole time. Humming. and drumming, some of these ancient practices. I remember, I think you wrote it in your book about the didgeridoo, the sort of Aboriginal instrument that has a real loud vibration. What is it about the vibrating sounds that sort of that are beneficial for us?
Yeah, so I lived in Australia for 2 years in Darwin, and there's a really famous band that comes from Darwin called Yothu Yindi. And I mean, they're like globally hugely successful, but they always do concerts for free in Darwin. And I was so lucky to get to go to one of them. And they've got massive didgeridoos. So the vibration, you feel it through your whole body.
Wow.
And there's a reason that sound bathing and gong baths have become so popular, because it basically resets your nervous system. So, we're all so stressed out, chronically stressed, and that means that most of the time we're in fright, flight, fight, which is the sympathetic nervous system. And vibration is one of the things that can reset us to parasympathetic, which is like rest and digest. But I think, what's really important to say is that in Paleolithic times, where we had no spare resources for fun, it was all about survival, we engaged in drumming, humming, chanting. We made these instruments. We made cave paintings. So why? The only reason can be that it was crucial to our survival, and it helped us to make sense of the world around us, and it fostered a sense of belonging. And what's really interesting is that we tend to think that cave paintings from 40,000 years ago are the first evidence of humans making art. But actually, 10,000 years before that, there is evidence that in southern Africa, people were carving into ostrich eggshells.
Oh, wow.
50,000 years before that, people were making necklaces out of shells and wearing them, and taking crumbled ochre and putting it on their faces and their bodies to adorn themselves.
Oh, gosh.
500,000 years ago, we made tools that were more beautiful and symmetrical than they had to be to do the job that they were for.
What?
Yeah.
What? That's mind-blowing.
I know. And
that's incredible.
So that speaks to the importance of art and beauty to humans.
Yeah.
Like I think I mentioned earlier, I actually had to research and find citations for, is art what makes us human?
Wow. So if we're not engaging in arts, we're really depriving something that is deeply, deeply human.
Or I would say at least noticing beauty. I think that's an easier thing to bring into your life.
Sure.
Not everyone that listens to this is going to necessarily go to an art gallery or start, painting. Yeah. But bringing nature into your home, noticing beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're really easy things to almost immediately enrich your life.
And on the subject of enrichment, what about this concept of olfactory enrichment? The smells and other things that again have been passed down through human history.
Yeah, so there's some really incredible research that came out recently that shows that olfactory enrichment, which means just smelling different things during the day, can improve memory and cognition as we age. But there's a particular research paper that shows that people who the experiments were done overnight with diffusers giving out essential oils, but you can do it by smelling your coffee, lighting a candle, I've got reed diffusers and mechanical diffusers throughout my house. That if you rotate through 7 different smells, it increases your brain power by 226%.
Just smells?
Yeah.
Really? Any particular smells? Any particular essential
obviously
oils?
trying to keep them natural. No, it's just a variety.
Really?
Wow. Yeah.
That's amazing. Do you have a diffuser?
I've got 2 mechanical diffusers, a reed diffuser. I use incense.
That's amazing.
I'm very conscious about, when I walked in here, didn't I say, it smells nice?
Yes, that's the first thing you said. Yeah,
smell
we
of
hadn't even been cooking.
cooking.
It was yesterday that we were cooking.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're really in tune to that, clearly. That's amazing. Okay, so I've got a little list of things that I need to do here. So nature, gratitude, the art of noticing, saliency, humming, and actually engaging in some, vibrational sense. You mentioned sound baths as well. How where do those come from? Are they Chinese in origin or
They're
Indian?
definitely Eastern.
Eastern,
I think.
right? Yeah.
I think like they're more aligned with Buddhist
Gotcha.
countries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got sound bowl at home as well. I want to add one in to all of those because to really demonstrate like what we do in real life, which is that, you know, you've cooked for me with your family and stuff, but we go for walks and talks, you know, and we really share stuff and we give each other such a sense of psychological safety. That is so important to people. Like, we can't exist by ourselves. We have to be part of a tribe.
Yeah.
So that's the one that I would say is up there for me with nature.
Yeah.
And I remember when Rochelle was pregnant and we went to Holland Park.
Yeah.
And we saw those little ducklings. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember that.
Because we were walking, because I wanted to get the walk in, but then like we stopped and we were talking. And after a while I was like, I want to like keep moving. And I was like, you can't stop looking at the baby ducklings, can you? And you were like, no, I can't.
I think it was just touching me at the time, you know, this thought of having a little duckling myself. But yeah, it's, I mean, I think I've definitely led into the art of noticing. Did I tell you I went on a silent retreat at the start of the year?
I'm not sure you told me about a silent retreat.
So
no, you told me about another retreat.
Yeah, I did a silent retreat at the start of this year where there's no phones, emails, no speaking, no reading, no listening. And honestly, it was one of the best experiences I've had. Not in the moment, actually. It was afterwards, because obviously, like, I was very bored during the time. I was like, oh, I just wish I could listen to a podcast, or I could check the news or check my whatever. And I remember there were times where I was just sat on a bench, and luckily the weather was great, and I was outside, and I just sort of unpacked my entire life because I had time. What else was I going to do?
How long was it?
It was 3 days.
Okay.
So, and I went through like my earliest memories. I unpacked my childhood. I revisited some positive memories. Some negative ones creeped up as well. But generally, it was quite positive. But the best thing that I found was actually after the retreat. And I was a lot more present with Raphael, who was 3 or 4 months at a time. And I had less nervous energy about grabbing my phone because that sort of habituation had sort of been interrupted. And I guess that if we're thinking about things on this list, what would be the opposite of things that you try and actively avoid to ensure that you remain open?
So I think the main one that I'm quite well known for is that I never watch the news.
Rochelle finds that really irritating, the fact that I don't watch the news.
Really?
Yeah, because she tells me about the news. I'm like, I had no idea. She was like, what do you mean? You have no idea?
And that I do digital detoxes over Christmas and New Year.
Yeah.
So anything from 2 to 4 weeks.
Nice.
That creates so much space and time and ends up with me being super creative.
Yeah.
And really makes you realise how much time you spend on your phone.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the main thing? I mean, have you ever done like a retreat? You mentioned dark retreats in your book, actually, mimicking a near-death experience. It sounds quite extreme.
Yeah, it does.
And I guess it is, right? You're in darkness for 7 days.
I know. I mean, you can just do it for a few hours or a weekend, but in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, it's all about sevens. So monks actually do it for 7 weeks.
7 weeks?
49 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But I've actually been invited to one since I spoke about it, which I'm excited for. I think
7 weeker?
No, I think it'll probably be 7 days.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, so it's like double walled, so it's completely like pitch black.
Gosh.
And of course that induces a lot of melatonin, so people tend to sleep a lot at first, but you fall asleep in darkness and you awake in darkness. And then apparently you start to see like the walls shimmering and glowing a little bit. So light comes from darkness. And then people, you know, at first they might see like shooting stars or whatever. And eventually people see animals, deities, angels. And it is the closest thing that you can experience as a human to a near-death experience, because obviously you can't really induce that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it has the same benefits that I described earlier from near-death experiences.
Yeah. Gosh, you've got to tell us how that goes.
Do you want to come with me?
I'm not joking. I would 100% be up for that because I've had my mini silent retreat experience, which, you know, in Vipassana, I think is like 10 days. So I did like a 3-day one. So it was sort of like, you know, silent retreat light, but feeling the benefits of that afterwards has made me really intrigued and just realigning. And it sounds extreme, but if you think about our day to day, it is really extreme. You know, we're inside a lot. We're not engaging with nature nowhere near as much. We're not grounding. I know you talked about grounding in the book as well. And, you know, there's some science around that. We even had Dr. Drew Ramsey talking about that as a psychiatrist himself, about the importance of grounding and the ions. And there's science around this as well. You know, it's so I'm really fascinated by this, and I would 100% be up for that. Is it in the UK or is it abroad?
No, this one's in the US.
Oh wow, okay, yeah. No, I would definitely be up for that. So you know, I'm getting a picture of like your day, spending a lot more time in nature, gratitude journaling, humming. Are there any sort of other non-negotiables that you do that would be useful for the audience, or something that you think is a little bit more extreme that perhaps is something that most people wouldn't do?
Not really. Honestly, I keep it very simple. You know, I do my gratitude as soon as I wake up. I try to notice beauty throughout the day. I absolutely love and care for and invest in the people that are in my life. I go for lots of long walks. And I go to every single ballet that comes out at Royal Opera House.
I can definitely attest to that. You are just such a loving person, and it's amazing that I feel very privileged to have you in my life.
Aww.
You're just incredible. And
same. And like, love your wife and your baby so
much. And it's great so I can pick your brain when it comes to Raphael, because I definitely want to expand his consciousness. Because, and just going back to what we started this podcast saying, you know, I want him as well as myself to experience everything that life has to offer.
Yeah, of course.
And that means being open to what we can't explain currently and the universe.
I'm just going to put this in here now, like officially. I still think that having me as a godmother is going to be like the best thing.
We're going to negotiate that with Rochelle. Thank you, Tara. You're the best. I appreciate you. I appreciate, you know, what you put out there in the world. Your work is incredible. I read The Source multiple times a year, along with other books that you've mentioned, like Untethered Cell and James Allen, As a Man Thinketh. And now Signs is going to be one of those books as well.
Thank you.
If you loved that episode, you will love the full library of podcasts from the Doctor's Kitchen Library. We talk about everything from inflammation, supplements, and food as medicine. Just like this episode right here. You can click it right now and check it out.